All right, there we go. Hey, everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your critique of the week. It is Friday, November 14th. Thanks so much for joining me. We had a little technical hiccup at the beginning, but we're good to go. Now, we're going to be focusing a little bit to start the episode on those essays. I've seen a lot of comments in our critique or our prompt lines group kind of confused about what the theme actually is. We have a wonderful episode, or pair of episodes, of the Poetry Space, which is the show that Katie Dozier produces, which is over on iTunes and Spotify and all that, with Jane Hirschfield herself talking about the essay form. But I thought maybe we'd go into it in a little bit more depth, because that is the prompt for this week, what we're doing on Sunday. And so we're going to start out doing that, and then we'll look at some of the submissions in the critique submission folder. We'll get through a little bit of those too, as many as we can. As always, through the whole thing, leave as many comments as you can. Make sure you click the like button. That helps this spread around everywhere. Yeah. Rosenar says, how come the sun is always shining on Tim? Yeah, this time of day, we have these really wonderful windows that are high up in this office, but we got to find a way to block them better. All right, so we're going to take a look first at this essay form. And if you follow the Poetry Space, you listen to that episode, Jane talks about it as a way, and I don't want to give away too much of that because the background is there in the episode, but she talks about how she realized she was doing something with a certain kind of poem, and she didn't really know what to call it, and she thought about different ways of thinking about it. It reminds me of what my friend Eric Campbell calls vertical essays, is what he likes to think of poetry, the way he writes. But she had a lot of facts and things she wanted to get in. She was focusing on a certain topic and trying to get at sort of the heart of it, and she decided to call these essays. And an essay is the, especially in sciences, but it's the breaking down of like a sample to see what's in it, basically. So you can assay a lot of things, but most commonly it's like minerals. A mineral assay would show like how much gold and iron and other minerals are in like a rock sample. That's one of the things you would do, an assayer would do. And it still happens a lot today in all the mining industries and all that kind of thing. So those are what essays are. And to sort of take a thing you want to examine and use the tools of poetry to examine it. That's what an essay really is. I thought I'd pull up one of her newer ones. This is from her book. Here, let me put it on screen. This is from her book. And I really recommend this book, The Asking. And that's her new and selected poems book. It's this beautiful cover. Really one of the books we kind of treasure around here. It's a great volume you have on your bookshelf. And one of the ones in the newer section is Silence, an Essay. And so here she's exploring the concept of silence. And we'll take a look at this. Silence, an Essay. Yeah. Yeah, Holly York says, yeah, so you could say assay too. We talk about that in the episode. I worked in a lab where we said essay, so that's how I always say it. Silence, an Essay. No one wants to buy you or gossip about you or play your unlabeled, unlined vinyl LP. How quickly you're consigned to the bin labeled boredom. How untradeable, how unfollowed down a dark street. Silence cannot be taught and refuses all invitations. Cupped in one open hand, it feels weightless. With time, though, silence starts to grow heavy, to silently weep. But it's hard to be silent while weeping. The silence leaves. The empty hand without it... Oops, I can put myself on the screen too. The empty hand without it trembles a little. Einstein called time what stops everything from happening at once. Silence stops everything from shouting at once. At 5:18 here, every morning, one loud bird complains about too much silence. The day is here, it announces. No other birds join it, so it goes back to being quiet. Hearing it helps me. Each morning I'm glad of silence, but also glad of the bird that woke me so I can be happy in a moment right alongside it, knowing soon I'll again not be awake. Silence is generous that way, also is poor. It's worth nothing until you'd give anything for some. So this is a way that that Janet's exploring the concept of silence itself and sort of the value in what science means. In the same way, imagine that you would have a sample of rock, of ore, and you want to figure out what's inside. Imagine that's silence itself in this concept. And she explores it by using the tools of poetry, but looking at it from all different ways. So if you're actually essaying or assaying, I should try to start saying it like that just because everybody complains that I say it assay. But so if you start assaying, you break it down and then you do a lot of different processes onto that. You heat it up, you add acid to melt certain things away. You see which parts react in certain things. That's how you do an assay. And so this is what she's doing here, but using the tools of poetry. So first she uses her imagination and thinks about, no one wants to buy you or gossip about you. And then that idea of like, how would you buy silence? Or play your unlabeled, unlined vinyl LP. So what would a silent LP be? It would be unlined, record. And so she goes, so she imagines that, but then she moves on right away. So that was like a little, you can see the sort of creative, like spark that generated the second line. Like she was thinking, no one wants to buy you or gossip about you. And then this image comes to her about what the record would look like, how it would be unlined and unlabeled. And then she moves on from that though. How quickly you're consigned to the bin labeled boredom, how untradeable, how unfollowed down a dark street. So she's moving to like another imagined thing, and then she moves on from that too. Silence cannot be taught and refuses all invitations. So she's thinking about, so this is, you could almost call it like a list poem. It's a list of ways you could, I think maybe thinking about it, there's that way we talked about a lot past episodes, both of the Critique of the Week and other stuff, when we had David Kirby on, and his form, The Braid, which we talk about. And his idea of the braid is to take three different sort of story concepts or ideas or parts of history or three items that sort of seem distantly connected but not really connected, and then weaves back and forth within the poem. So the three different topics, the three different times or stories or whatever, are sort of interwoven, and you go into one, then you go into another, then you go into another, and you go back and forth like that, blending these things in. What you can think of an essay is doing a similar kind of thing where you're weaving together different facts and details, like everything you can find about silence. And so we come up later on an Einstein quote about silence. So it's a way to use the tools of research too, in putting them into a poem and organize them that way. Another way you might want to think of it is sort of like a guzzle, where the fundamental part of a guzzle is that each couplet is a different sort of time and place and location. And they are all connected in sort of disparate, interesting, fascinating ways that make it weave together. But you jump a lot between like story, different stories, different characters, different perspectives are all woven through in the guzzle. Yeah. I don't know if Mary Keating said that before me, but if so, yeah, like a guzzle. And here you're sort of guzzling different facts. So it's like jumping between those and having sort of a poetic insight. But as soon as you have a poetic insight, feel free to move on. And so in that way, you're covering all the research that you've done around the concept of silence. And that's why it's sort of like writing an essay, because you can do the research that would go into an essay and you put it into a poem. In a way, maybe also that you would write creative nonfiction. But here she's still using line breaks. She's still using the kind of cadence and rhythm and attention to that music that you would in a poem. And so that's why it's still shaped like a poem. But the thought is more like how you would construct a creative essay. And that's the concept of what an essay is. So hopefully we'll understand that more. So let's keep going a little bit, though. Cupped in one open hand, it feels weightless. With time, though, silence starts to grow heavy, to silently weep. But it's hard to be silent while weeping. The silence leaves. So even there, so we think about weeping, but then you can't silently weep. So then she adds that line, but then she moves on again. The empty hand without it trembles a little. And here comes a fact she probably researched, Einstein talking about it, but Einstein called time what stops everything from happening at once. Silence stops everything from shouting at once. At 5:18 here in the morning, one loud bird complains about too much silence. Yeah. So you feel, even though it's written out as a poem with breaks in the movie, you could see how it's like a list poem almost. It's like a list of facts around this concept. There's another way that she does it too, and I think we'll move on from this. There's another way she does it too with, hang on one second, I'll pull up one of the ones that's like this. I think the best one that does it this way is To Judgment, I think, and but there are a bunch of them like that. So, and with those, when she says to judgment instead of just silence, it's like she's writing to and addressing the judgment. So here, we'll look at this really quick too. To judgment, an essay. You change a life as eating an artichoke changes the taste of whatever is eaten after. Yet you, so she's talking directly to judgment in this version, in this variation, but still doing the same thing. It's like a list of details, all the things, all the ways that she can use sort of creative imagination to address the topic. She has that, and she's sort of, I don't know, maybe if it's not a braid, it's like crochet or something, where she's like crocheting it into a big tapestry. I don't know. But that's what she's doing with all these facts and details about, her thoughts around the concept of judgment and what judgment itself is. So, yet you are not an artichoke, not a piano or cat, not objectively present at all. And what of you a cat possesses is essential but narrow. To know if the distance between two things can be leapt. The piano, that good servant, has none of you in her at all. She lends herself to what asks. This has been my ambition as well. Yet a person who has you is like an iron spigot whose water comes from far-off mountain springs. So you see how she has those, listing of things like that. The piano, talking about the piano, how she herself wants to be a piano. That's been my ambition, to be that receptive and free of judgment. And then she goes to this idea of the spigot too. Yet a person who has you is like an iron spigot whose water comes from far-off mountain springs. And then she uses that, pushing into the symbolism and leaping into the concept and the image. What would that be like? It would be inexhaustible. Your confident pronouncements flow coldly delicious. So she extends that metaphor. But then she moves on. For if judgment hurts the teeth, it doesn't mind. Not judgment. Teeth pass, pain passes, judgment decrees what remains, the serene judgments of evolution, or the judgment of a boy king entering Persia. Burn it, he says, and it burns. And if a small tear swells the corner of one eye, it is only the smoke. It is no more him than a beetle, fleeing the flames of the village with her 6-legged children. The biologist Haldane, in one of his tenderer moments, judged beetles especially loved by God, because he had made so many. For judgment can be tender. So here she takes in another piece of research into it. The biologist Haldane, in one of his tenderer moments, judged beetles especially loved by God because he had made so many. So she takes the research she's done and puts that into the poem. For judgment can be tender. I have seen you carry a fate to its end as softly as a retriever carries the quail. Yet however much I admire you at such moments, I cannot love you. You are too much in me, weighing without pity your own worth. And still, you have to remember she's talking to judgment itself the whole time. And so every time she says, I cannot love you, she's talking about judgment. I can't love judgment. Judgment are too much in me, weighing without pity your own worth. When I have erased you from me entirely, disrobed of your measuring adjectives, stripped from my shoulders and hips each of your nouns, when the world is horsefly, coal barge, and the dawn the color of winter butter. Yeah. So that's, so those are two different ways, or, there's the second person assay, and there's the first person assay, like silence, but it's always that. It's always, how many different ways can you think about the topic that you want to explore in more depth, and then use the tools that we have, not just poetry, but background research. Yeah, Shauna Bowling says it seems essays are very introspective, contemplative. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Tara Meslick McMahon says, how do we know Jane Hirschfield is talking to judgment? Could you explain that? Well, it's written as to judgment, and it's a tradition. It's just how titles go often in poems. It's to this. You're writing to that thing. and then you can sort of confirm, like checking your math or something, that that's true, that it makes sense that way. You change a life as eating an artichoke changes the taste of whatever is eaten after. So that judgment, it just makes sense, right? Judgment changes a life as eating an artichoke changes the taste, so it does. Yet judgment is not an artichoke. It's not a piano or a cat, so it works that way, you can tell. Tom Bartlett says, I feel like I've been writing essays all along. Yeah, and maybe that's the way. I mean, it's a great way, it's a great way to get around, like it's impossible to have writer's block. Like one of the things I love to do still when I'm writing poems is a lot of research. Like it's fun to read about a topic. It's like a line pops up in your poem that you're writing about, and then you go to Wikipedia and learn more about that thing. And then all those details that you learn end up in your poems. And that's a thing that's always been fun for me. This way you start out with the topic you want to talk about and research, and you use all the fuel of what you found there to make the poetry and to make it move through that topic from as many angles as possible. I think I'll share really quickly too. So that silence in essay was one of the ones that I shared, the first one. When we did this before, I wrote one as a response to that, really. It was called Noise. And was it two noise or just noise? Let me see. I don't remember. It was two noise. So I have an essay, and I'll show this here, and just I can talk a little bit about what I was thinking when I was writing this, trying to do what Jane was doing. So here, this is like 2 years ago, to noise, an essay, and that was in response to Jane's to silence. We act as though you were only a nuisance, an irritating addition to the system of being, a no thing, never not there, a mosquito in the air, a mosquito in the ear, a buzz in the air. And so here, I was just thinking about the ways we think of noise and the ways noise appears. Like there's something different about noise where it's, the whole spectrum. It's like the white noise static. It's the background stuff that you sort of don't pay attention to. So I was thinking of different ways you can explain and describe that in this section of the poem. So a mosquito in the ear is one of those things that makes a noise, the buzz in the air. We only listen in your departure. And I think the power had gone out recently, not too long ago. I was up in Wrightwood, where we used to broadcast from, and they had really old, antiquated lines, and the electrical system would go down frequently, and we had two. There was a backup, so you have to wait 10 minutes for them to switch it over. But so there's a lot of these power cutting off things. But we only listen in your departure, when the power cuts off in a heat wave and the condenser ticks to a stop. So many sounds in the house to unnotice all at once. The hum of the fridge, the plastic fan in the computer, the transformer's static prick from the yard. And then an airplane in the distance. Children playing at the corner park. Bird calls to bird, neighbor to neighbor. A car zips by with its window down, one song and 3 notes. And so this was a whole section that was like one sort of poetic riff, thinking about when the power goes off. But instead of like continuing that and making that a whole poem, it's move on to different ways to think about silent or noise and things that we've learned about noise. So, moving off of that, instead of continuing with that and coming to a conclusion, I'm trying to look at it from all different angles. And so instead I go to, but in between each of these, your absence is the death that was before we were, the lack of even lack we know will come to be. And then here's some research that I'd done and just read about in science articles before. Science says a little noise adds speed to a network. A quiet classroom makes it harder to learn. 100 miles up, there is no noise above the atmosphere. There is no sound in the airless hell beneath our feet. So this is just expanding out and thinking about noise in different places where it is and where it's not, and moving through them kind of like a list. You are a blanket within the blanket that keeps us warm. The shapeless there we press our thoughts against to give us form. And so that was, so hopefully this concept makes sense of taking the topic that you want to write about and thinking about it from as many different perspectives as you can to see what's like really inside of it and see what you can learn from that process. Because we're always trying to learn things about what we're writing. And this is like one technique for learning through the process of writing. Yeah. Oh, wait. Well, anyway, so that's that. Hopefully that helps. And of course, do listen to the Poetry Space. We also talked about it on her episode of the Rattlecast. I think it might have been episode 217. So you can check that out. That was what her talking about it on the Rattlecast made us want to do, talk to her on an episode of the Poetry Space. And so that sort of we wanted to expand on that. And we have a whole two-parter. So check that out. I think you'll enjoy it. Jane's just a wonderful person too. And that's what we're doing. And we're doing an essay is the prompt of the week. So write your essays, share them on the Rattlecast this Monday, and we'll see what everybody can come up with. Now let's move on to some actual regularly scheduled programming and look at Critique of the Week. So what do we have here? We'll go back to the oldest poems in the queue. We got March 20th, and this is a poem by... Maybe before I do that, I should see it whether any more questions. Bryn Pope says it's a cure for writer's block. Yeah. Shape of Soup says it's interesting to see this approach as a form. For me, it's just a cognitive perspective. Yeah, and that's what Jane talks about in her... in that episode where we explored this in more depth, that it's not a form in the way we normally think of forms. But if you think about that there's another episode where we talked, or maybe it was I can't remember, we do so much. There was it's sometime we were talking about that book about the different shapes and structures of poems. Someone will remember what that book's called. Structure and Surprise by, I can't remember, but it's about all the different structures behind poems and the way that poems, the way that there's sort of a plot arc, and it's a similar kind of thing where it's not necessarily a form, it's a way of approaching a poem that results in a poem that sort of feels a certain way, which is again more essay-ish, more variable, more moving through. Mike Thune or Michael Thune. Thanks, Katie. Yeah. So anyway, it's fun to try. And I think, again, as somebody said earlier, I think it was Bryn, it's a great cure for writer's block. If you don't know what to do, pick a topic, pick an abstract concept, pick something, an archetype of some kind, and then explore it. Like, do some research, where it came from, the etymology of the words, what famous people have said about it, the science behind the thing, the psychology behind the thing, the philosophy behind the thing. Read around that topic, and then list out and move through the interesting things that you find there. And remember that if you find something interesting, it's because there's something deeper into it that your subconscious mind wants to unlock. So the fact that you find facts and details interesting means they're interesting to us. It means there's something deeper. And what you're doing is trying to explore and figure out like what's there underneath. And that's what we're going to do with this form. So hopefully it's a lot of fun. And, well, good luck. You got the weekend to do it, so we'll see what everybody comes up with. All right, so we're going to move on to the regularly scheduled program. And like I said, Timothy Tilby is the first poet up from Ontario, Canada. No general questions, but a poem here, Common Mercy. And this sounds like it could be an essay too, right, with that title, but it's probably not. But maybe it is. Maybe it's an unwitting essay and it doesn't know. But here it is. Let me... get a little bigger too. Okay. Common Mercy. A jar of tarnished scented coins will buy thick torn crust, the heat of cornmeal, the breath of rice. This is our vacant lot, the gouged mud cupping old rain. These are wooden chairs, mismatched, arrayed by the curb, our sofa sweating out its innards, while severed wires glint hideously. Somewhere a man beneath a blaring loudspeaker slaps tar across mirror after mirror. Somewhere a long, creaking hallway leads to millions of tiny flashbulbs, to cryptic postcards, rusty pistols, yawning turntables, and the invading moss. It takes the gleam of a bottle cap in the gutter to recall cool drops of olive oil, the lake's furrows of blue and black and green. And so that's the first poem. And, really nice writing and language. Yeah, Danette Burme says, what a great first line. Yeah. And one thing I should say, we're doing this a little bit differently now, and I'm pre-screening some of the poems. So I'm doing that first quick read, and I'm only going to pull up poems that we can explore, that have a lot going for them already, so we can explore in a little more depth, because I think that's a lot more fun. Yeah. Rose Leonard says you can tell in the first few lines that it's going to be one of the better ones. Yeah. Shape of Soup says some lines feels a bit stiff, though. So yeah. Holly York says wonderful imagery, can't yet figure out what it's about. Yeah, it's one of those things where I enjoy it, and I'm waiting to sort of have it unlock for me and connect to it, and I'm a little bit lost. So let's read it again more slowly, as it were, see if we can make sense of this on a second read. Common mercy. And so I guess we're talking about mercy, I assume. A jar of tarnished scented coins will buy thick torn crust, the heat of cornmeal, the breath of rice. This is our vacant lot, the gouged mud cupping old rain. These are wooden chairs mismatched, arrayed by the curb, our sofa sweating out its innards while severed wires glint hideously. So you can feel a real nice sense of rhythm to this. But as Doug Van Houser says, language is impressive, but wondering what is the common mercy? Yeah. Ambassador Slay says, I agree, it lacks emotion. Tom Barlow says, looking for some heart. Yeah, I'm trying to put it together. So, a jar of tarnished scented coins. And I'm wondering, first of all, what the tarnished scented could be. Like why, what that scent actually is. Is it like just the penny kind of taste? That like iron kind of thing? Yeah. Bree Stiglitz says, yeah, maybe the title could do more to give us a sense of direction. Yeah. So I'm not quite sure how that jar of pennies fits in the scene that comes after. A jar of tarnished scented coins will buy thick torn crust, the heat of cornmeal, the breath of rice. This is our vacant lot, the gouged mud cupping old rain. So we get a nice visual there. I think the poem feels like it picks up when we're situated within the vacant lot. These are wooden chairs mismatched, arrayed by the curb, our sofa sweating out its innards. There's a great description there. I love that concept of describing it that way. While severed wires glint hideously. So, that visual for these 3 or 4 lines is really strong. Somewhere a man beneath a blaring loudspeaker slaps tar across mirror after mirror, and it's a great visual. But I'm still struggling to put together the why. Dick Westheimer says 2 abstractions in a title is often too many for me. Give me an image, a handle to hold as I enter the spell of the poem. Yeah, really well put. So like literally. A man beneath a blaring loudspeaker slaps tar across mirror after mirror. And it's a really interesting image, and I can see it very clearly. But why? I don't understand what the situation is well enough. Somewhere a long creaking hallway leads to millions of tiny flash bulbs. To cryptic postcards, rusty pistols, yearning turntables, and the invading moss. So we're getting some sort of like view over time of the decay going on in this, vacant lot. But I'm not sure what the millions of tiny flash bulbs are. It takes the gleam of a bottle cap in the gutter to recall cool drops of olive oil. The lake furrows of blue and black and green. Yeah, so ultimately what happens here is I'm just lost. Clayton Clark got lost at the flashbulbs. There's just not enough connective tissue. I don't know who's speaking these. We have it's our vacant lot. It's not like a vacant lot or the vacant lot. It's our vacant lot. So it's somebody sharing in this scene, but we don't know what it is. I don't know what to take from anything. Also, as Lisa Seidenberg says, the lot actually isn't vacant. So I think there's just not enough connective tissue to me. I don't understand why it's a common mercy. It's a jumble of things. And again, this is one of those things we talk about much, but if we can't see what's going on, if we have to be guessing at what's actually going on, then we can't feel a connection to the poem. even though it's sort of confusing because we get really crisp images, we get details that we can see. We get a scene that sort of emerges, and we can sort of enter that, but we don't know what anything is connected to or the why behind everything. And there's not enough hint at that. And so we end up spending all of our time and our sort of mental resources thinking about how these things fit together. And because we're doing that, that's where our energy is going, and not it being connected, not understanding the emotional energy. And that's why it feels flat to everybody. So this is a poem where it's just too cryptic. It's too opaque to have a real connection. And, and that's just the fact. Yeah. As Kitty said, this poem, interesting descriptions. I go nowhere. Yeah. Yeah. Shauna Bowling says, I almost see a declining string of row houses in an old, neglected inner city neighborhood. I could see that too. Mary Lisa says, is it part of a larger piece? Maybe. But for right now, as it's sent, this is all we can do with it. I don't know how it connects to Common Mercy. I don't know who the speaker is. I don't know what's actually going on. So that's all I can say about it, really. At the level of, line breaks and imagery, there's a nice rhythm to the poem. There's good detail that engages us. And that's why from a distance, I thought I was going to really like this poem. But it turns out there's just not enough. Yeah, I think it needs a central person, says Danette Burmia. Lori Flanagan says, I think it's beautiful. A better title might be The Rubble of What Was. That could... Yeah. Ryan McCarty says, is Common Mercy the name of a shelter or resource name? That could be. But we still... I'm trying to think of an example of a poem that has a really great narrator, because it feels like if there's a more clear sense of who is guiding us through this little scene, we might have a way to connect with it better. Yeah. And so anyway, I guess we have to move on. There's just not enough connective tissue in this one. Although on the level of, line breaks and diction and rhythm and music, it's a poem that works really well. Yeah, Petty Arbor says, the grid is haunting. Maybe the poet is afraid of the understory where the truth is. I find that sometimes when my poems are vague. Yeah, it might be that we're hiding from our own story and intentionally not revealing it. And just a reminder to everybody, we want to hear each other's stories. That's why we're doing this. If you're writing a poem, the person reading your poem wants to know what you're writing about. Like, there's a reason why we're sharing our stories. And, it doesn't have to be complete. You can set up a little bit of it and then dive into more abstract ways of encountering it that reveal more. But having some sense of what's actually going on is just so important. And this feels like it's missing it. Yeah, but there's so many good images to work with, as Danette says. And it's true. Let's see if the other poem has more of a sense of where we are, or if this is a regular issue. Cosmic Quandary. If the universe has a skeleton, then its flesh is void, buzzing with loops of notational particles. If the universe has flesh, then we are gut microbes clinging to a crumb that cycles round and round. If the universe is a creature, it's too big, too other, its finitude boggling our own, as we blandly mouth the word a number, flailing utterly to describe it. If the universe has a body, are we all the mind it has, or are we glints in a subtle network of spanning suns and galaxies? If the universe has a soul, is it cold as zero, or grander than we can aspire? If the universe begins beyond all wisp of atmosphere, spilling endless jewels, gleaming nebula, flashing nova, from the gulf of its invention, marvels we'll never touch, must we dream of possessing them? We, spinning on a blob of iron, caught in a film of wind and water, our deepest delving a mere scratch, our highest soaring a mere hop. We, careless of our only home and of each other, we must be reconciled at last under this sky. Yeah. Yeah, as Holly Lurk and Hamet Malik say, is this an essay? It feels, I think you could call it that. If we titled it that, it would become it, because we're looking at the universe from a lot of different perspectives. Yeah. Rosenar says, I like the if the universe repetition. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know, let's dig in and look at it a little bit more. I felt, as I was reading it, I felt like it went on a little too long. I got a little bored at some part of it. I really liked the repetition, but felt like I was waiting for it to pay off in a way that had a good conclusion. Yeah, Rachel Grieve says, I like the is. There might have been one too many. Yeah, I got to that part too where I was like, okay, enough of this. Give me where it's going. Give me the then. Like it's like an if then, but it is a larger structure. The then doesn't have a whole lot there. So cosmic quandary again. If the universe has a skeleton, then its flesh is void, buzzing with loops of notational particles. And I think that's a nice description, because there is, if we call the that web where we've seen those pictures of deep space and the cosmic background radiation played out, there are these like filaments where stars have clustered in strands, and you could call that a skeleton, and you could say the flesh is the interstices in between, which are buzzing with loops of notional particles. I like that. I like the saying notional particles too. In a poem. So I think that's a really nice description to start off. If the universe has a flesh, then we are gut microbes clinging to a crumb that cycles round and round. So again, I think this is a nice start to the poem. If we use this metaphor of scaling up the universe to being a biological creature, then yeah, the flesh would be that dark matter and energy that's swirling around in the middle, popping in and out of existence. And then, we would be, I'm not sure exactly it works, because, gut microbes would sort of be in the flesh. If we already use the skeleton as the structure and the lattice of that, then we'd be sort of, we'd have to be microbes clinging to the bones, but, or like inside the bones, maybe in the marrow. I guess that's even better. But anyway, so I'm not sure technically if that metaphor really works. If the universe is a creature, it's too big, too other, its finitude boggling our own. As we blandly mouth a word, a number, failing utterly to describe it. I like that description too. And then the repetition of the if the universe, like we've already mentioned, is holding the poem together. If the universe has a body, are we all the mind it has, or are we glints in a subtle network spanning suns and galaxies? I think this is where I got tired, because this thought wasn't as interesting as the first three. And I think this is the spot where I started to lose focus a little bit and paying attention. And one of the best ways to become a better writer and to be a better reader, is to notice yourself noticing your attention. When your mind starts to wander is the place where the poem starts to not be as interesting, because you're not drawn to attend to it, and that's why your attention lapses. And I thought the concepts in the first three stanzas were really interesting. And then this fourth, it doesn't do nearly as much. If the universe has a body, we are all the mind it has, or are we glints in a subtle network spanning suns and galaxies? I think, are we all the mind it has? If we extend it on that a little more without the or, maybe this was like a turn where we shouldn't have taken, but the energy gets sucked out for me in the second half, those two lines. And then we get to even shorter. If the universe has a soul, is it cold as zero or grander than we can aspire? If the universe begins beyond all wasp of atmosphere, spilling endless jewels, gleaming nebula, flashing nova from the gulf of its invention. So I love a phrase like the gulf of its invention. There's some really nice lines still, but we're sort of repeating ourselves at this point and not adding anything new, and the descriptions aren't getting as deep as they were at the beginning. Bree Stiglitz says, I feel like most people have had this thought or something like it, and I didn't get the surprise I wanted at the end, like I've already been here before in my mind. Yeah, too. It is, yeah. That's why we have to go somewhere, make it new, go somewhere surprising. We spinning on a blob of iron, caught in a film of wind and water, our deepest delving a mere scratch, our highest soaring a mere hop. So I don't know. The deepest delving is less than a scratch, and some of the technically it's just not working right as a metaphor. Our deepest delving a mere scratch, our highest soaring a mere hop. We careless of our only home and of each other, we must be reconciled at last under the sky. And it feels like a conclusion that hasn't, it's sort of tacked on at the end because we have to finish the poem at some point. So it hasn't really found itself. And really, to me, I think the poem just took a wrong turn at the or, and we really just want to dig into this and expand and where we can go with this line. Are we all the mind it has? Instead of like sort of spinning back on itself by negating that, and then you end up repeating yourself, and then you end up going nowhere surprising. I think that's what happened. The poem kind of did a spiral nosedive at that point when it had a lot of promise going on at the top. Danette Burmy says, like spinning on a blob of iron. Yeah, I like that too. Shauna Bowling says this poem makes humans come off as insignificant. And maybe that's the problem. I think maybe if we think about the scale of the universe, which most people have at some point in their lives, either, even if it's not going to a observatory or looking at like that deep field view image of Hubble where there's like a million galaxies in the hair width of the sky, but even just looking out at the stars at night and seeing the scale of just what you can see on a clear night away from the city lights, you feel tiny and small and insignificant. Or that famous photo, of course, the great blue dot. That's already the feeling that we get when we think about this topic. And so it doesn't go, that's why it doesn't go anywhere surprising, because it sort of goes where you go when you enter this space. But if instead of turning back on itself and repeating itself, if we dove into this idea of are we all the mind it has, and if we played with that more, maybe there's something more interesting there that would be surprising and new. Yeah. Jamie Thomas says the way it makes me feel small is kind of what I like about it. Yeah, Lauren DeJoy puts it this way: I enjoy the universe being compared to the human body, but it felt like there was no there. If you know what I mean, it lost its own point. Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And a lot of times I think you can see, and to me it's this spot here. We took, like, it's like two roads diverged in a woods, and I took the one, and they really weren't so much the same, because the one sort of doubled back on itself, and the one that we didn't take at this point is the one that went out into adventure and something new. Danette Burmy says we are the synapses firing in its mind. Yeah. I don't know. What did PMB say? PMB says if the universe is a body, then maybe each one of us are a universe. There's a great way to scale and go in a different direction with it. Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, we'll move on. So thanks for sharing that. And definitely poems with a lot of linguistic, quality. They were fun to read. Good sense of line break. Someone mentioned the starting each line with a capitalized letter, which is a convention some people like, and some people don't like it. I'm completely indifferent to that myself. It emphasizes that the line is a unit in a way that's slightly more strong than it is just with line breaks, and some people want that and like it, and some people don't like it. It's sort of like I don't know, that's one of those things, just a personal taste. Dick Westheimer says, that line about the mind could also lead to making the speaker feel large, which is my feeling when I gaze at the night sky, since I contain it in me when I look at it. Yeah, so if we did that, maybe that's the turn that would take us to somewhere different, but we sort of stay in the same place as we started. But anyway, just see, it's one of those poems that's just not finished, so what more can you explore in that one? But again, that poet was Timothy Tilby. Let's take a look at something else. Now we have Ed Jones. Ed from Pennsylvania. No general questions, so just wants these thrown up here. We got two poems, sort of... we got two poems, sort of average. No, we have three poems. We'll look at two of them. Okay, here's Premillennial. Let me zoom in a little bit too. Premillennial. I'm trying to jump up and down for joy. I've got the trampoline under me, and I'm bouncing in dead earnest. I've got gravity boots strapped on in case things get out of control. Each time the sky gets a little closer, I see a little farther over the hedge. Around the rim, 2 7-year-old girls giggle. We all know I'm an amateur, but I don't mind. I know I have my work cut out. 47 years is like an anchor I forgot to pull up before setting sail. Nevertheless, now, I'm airborne, ascendant. Why be a rocket scientist when I can be a rocket? I shuck the boots, feel all my corpuscles rush to my head, rush to my feet, force-feeding both. Halfway to the roof, my legs start doing the merengue, the salsa, the lady hop, a zydeco, that is pure slink and bounce. Halfway to the roof, quadratic equations start scribbling themselves across my brain, vector operations using complex numbers, the Taylor series, Riemann sums, half-lives of radioactive elements. The girls climb up. They bounce holding hands. They bounce holding hands with me. We are doing the hokey pokey in midair above a suburban subdivision where we all mow weed-free lawns, put the trash out on Wednesdays, arrange elaborate birthday parties for 2-year-olds and their parents. We're putting our left foot in, taking it out, putting our right foot in, taking it out. We are the world-famous Trampolina family. And now I am doing my world-famous finale act, bouncing higher than the red oak on Linden Ave. I do 5 quadruple back flips with a triple twist on the way down. On the way up, I'm almost swimming in air, doing the backstroke, almost slinging my way to eternity. Yeah, so Kitty Scruggs Galaxy says Shuck and Pure Slink are fun to read. Rachel Greer says that title makes me wonder if we're going to talk about eschatology, premillennial. I don't even know what eschatology is. Eschatology. Let me look that up. Eschatology. Oh, the part of theology concerned with death, judgment, or the final destiny of the soul. Premillennial. Interesting. Maybe she was talking about the last poem. Yeah. Nancy Sabanek says, nice diction, the lists of dance lingo. Yeah. Doug Van Hooter says last stanza sounds like it was tacked on. So I don't know. I'm confused about the title. I'm not sure if Rachel was talking about why does premillennial. I don't know. I don't know what that title means. Ryan McCarty says, I think I'm kind of tired of using generational names to convey pretty much anything. Oh, okay. So this is just something I don't know. Premillennial is a theological idea about end times? I didn't know that. But Ryan McCarty's returning that as, old. Premillennial is like before the millennial generation. Yeah. Rachel Griffith says it's a kind of theology with the rapture. Okay. Well, I learn something every day. I did not know that. How does that apply to the poem, though? Because I think Jamie Thomas says I had a boyfriend in college who kept referring to eschatology. That's what I thought, too. So, yeah, that's very different. All right. Anyway, I'm trying to jump up and down for joy. What does that have to do with... Yeah. Dick Westheimer says, yes, the last line seems like the poet took the first exit they found rather than, to paraphrase Billy Collins, diving back down to see what's there. So Kitty Scruggs says, Scruggs Galloway says she's jumping into the heavens hoping to, yeah, okay. Oh, like hoping to be raptured. Yeah, that's right. Okay. I just didn't make that connection because when he got to that point, yeah. Nancy Sabanek said, I think it's about an older person finally learning how to cut loose. And Lisa Seidenberg says, the trampoline seems to be a metaphor for something, but what? Well, it's interesting. The first 2 poems, poets we've looked at today, both have really interesting lines and not a lot of like critique on the level of word or what, things that don't fit or, the flow of the poem. All that kind of stuff is there, the nice levels of detail. Here we know exactly what we're doing at the beginning, which is nice. It's not it's too rare that we get to know what's going on in the poem. So but it becomes more about additively what's it adding up to and where's it going. So I guess we're going to have to read it again. I'm trying to jump up and down for joy. I've got the trampoline under me and I'm bouncing in dead earnest. There's the dead too, so I guess we're referencing it with knowledge right away. I've got gravity boots strapped on in case things get out of control. Each time the sky gets a little closer, I see a little farther over the hedge. Around the rim, 2 7-year-old girls giggle. We all know I'm an amateur, but I don't mind. I know I have my work cut out. 47 years is like an anchor. I forgot to pull up before setting sail. I love that line. That's one of my favorites. 47 years is like an anchor. I forgot to pull up before setting sail. That's great. Nevertheless, now I'm airborne, ascendant. I like this part too, that sort of aside. It makes us feel, more connected to the speaker by having that. I'm airborne, ascendant. Why be a rocket scientist when I can be a rocket? I like that too. I shuck the boots. Again, I think shuck is a nice word. Someone pointed out before. Feel all my corpuscles rush to my head, rush to my feet, force-feeding both, halfway to the roof. My legs start doing the meringue. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Meringue, the salsa, the Lindy Hop, the Zydeco. That is pure slink and bounce. Halfway to the roof, quadratic equations start scribbling themselves across my brain, vector operations using complex numbers, the Taylor series, remain sums, half-lives of radioactive elements. That's really cool. That's a great description of that sort of like, what's that movie, The Beautiful Mind, where the numbers always flash up in the equations, and I think that's a nice description of that kind of place to go mentally. The girls climb up, they bounce, they hold hands, or they bounce holding hands, they bounce holding hands with me. We're doing the hokey pokey. And so this is the part where I've enjoyed the poem all the way up to here. And I'm starting to think like, okay, now that's nicely established, but where are we going with this? What are we going to do? And I think the repetition of this, I'm not sure what's gained by this, and it felt a little slow. Yeah. So I don't know. I think the repetition here doesn't work as much as some of the stuff we've seen other places. We are doing the hokey pokey. Yeah, I was wondering which lines I would cut, but the girls climb up, they bounce. We are doing the hokey pokey. Like, you could just go there and nothing's lost by cutting these two lines. So I just cut those. We were doing the hokey pokey in midair above a suburban subdivision. So we sort of reset the scene, but in a way that's still visually striking and keeps us engaged with it. Where we all mow weed-free lawns, put out the trash out on Wednesdays, arrange elaborate birthday parties for 2-year-olds and their parents. This section doesn't seem to have, talking about the weed-free lawns is a bit sort of, it's not cliche, but it's like trite. It's been done before. It's something we just sort of say. The routines of putting out the trash. I think it loses some of the energy in this section. And again, it sort of loses energy. You see this all the time. We already saw it this week, where it takes a turn that's sort of a wrong turn. And I think repeating this bouncing sort of sucked the energy out of the process of creativity that was pulling out the interesting parts of the poem. Like how different it is when we're spitting out these vector operations and stuff, how much energy that has. You can feel it's like a force, like an actual like physical force that propels the poem forward. And then the girls climb up and then we sort of lose. It's almost like the poet was like, well, what happens next? And didn't really know. A lot of times you see movies like this where it's like, it's really engaging. You're totally on board with the movie. I can't remember what we were watching recently. Me and Katie, that there was something like that where it started out really interesting. Oh, it was that weird science fiction-y movie that we watched. I can't remember what it's called. But it was like, oh, this is interesting, and there's like good scenes going on, and then it just sort of lost sense. It was like, it's almost like the dog that caught the car kind of thing, where it's like, once you get to the thing you're setting up, you're like, well, what do I do with it now? Yeah. So in Shape of Soup says it's all a bit conceptually cliche, considering taking some time exploring evocative detail. Yeah. So anyway, we'll keep going. But I think that the turn here, we didn't surprise ourselves or go an interesting place with this turn. I think that's where the poem sort of starts to fizzle a little bit. It starts to get a little wobbly on its tracks. We're putting our left foot in, taking it out, putting our right foot in, taking it out. We're the world famous Trampolina family. I wonder if if you cut these two lines and then we're just doing the hokey pokey in a midair above a subdivision. We were putting our left foot in, taking it out. Like we can cut this too, because this was sort of, and getting more, that maintains the energy some. Putting our right foot in, taking it out. We're the world famous Trampolina family. And now I'm doing it in my world famous finale act, bouncing higher than the red oak on Linden Ave. I do 5 quadruple backflips with a triple twist, and that's a bit dull too. On the way down, on the way up, I'm almost swimming in air, doing the backstroke, almost slinging my way to eternity. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It just feels like it didn't know where it wanted to go, and I guess that's happening with a few poems today now. But it feels like Clayton Six. I don't love the whole last section, and what I want to. There's some other maybe like the absurdity of this is sort of the beauty of it, and in the energy that comes from there. And I think maybe the direction to go with this one is to lean into that and sort of let it speak for itself. Let me pull up. We haven't shared what's that poem? I don't think it's too long. Is it Happens Like This by James Tate? Feel how no, that's not the one I'm thinking of. What's the one where James Tate has like there's a pet goat? I mean, It Happens Like This can work too. Maybe this is fine to share. Oh, no, this is the one with the pet goat. Okay, sorry. So here, look at how James Tate with this poem, and it's a wonderful poem, anthologized and all that. It happens like this. And feel how he sets up a scene similar to like the trampoline scene. But then feel how we just sit with the absurdity and then we can meditate on that. And instead of like, it's almost like a show don't tell thing. It's like, or like be comfortable with the silence advice in speaking. You don't have to fill every piece of silence with an or something. Just be comfortable with that silence. Be comfortable with the absurdity. And maybe that's what we need to do in this poem. So let's read this by James Tate. It happens like this. I was outside of St. Cecilia's rectory smoking a cigarette when a goat appeared beside me. It was mostly black and white with a little reddish brown here and there. When I started to walk away, it followed. I was amused and delighted, but wondered what the laws were on this kind of thing. There's a leash law for dogs, but what about goats? People smiled at me and admired the goat. It's not my goat, I explained. It's the town's goat. Sorry, hang on. Lost my mouse. It's not my goat, I explained. It's the town's goat. I'm just taking my turn caring for it. I didn't know we had a goat, one of them said. I wonder when my turn is. Soon, I said. Be patient. Your time is coming. The goat stayed by my side. I stopped when I stopped. It looked up at me and I stared into its eyes. I felt he knew everything essential about me. We walked on. A policeman on his beat looked over us. That's a mighty fine goat you got there, he said, stopping to admire. It's the town's goat, I said. His family goes back 300 years with us, I said, from the beginning. The officer leaned forward to touch him, then stopped and looked up at me. Mind if I pat him, he asked. Touching this goat will change your life, I said. It's your decision. He thought real hard for a minute and then stood up and said, What's his name? He's called the Prince of Peace, I said. God, this town is like a fairy tale. Everywhere you turn, there's mystery and wonder. And I'm just a child playing cops and robbers forever. Please forgive me if I cry. We forgive you, officer, I said, and we understand why you, more than anybody, should never touch the prince. The goat and I walked on. It was getting dark, and we were beginning to wonder where we would spend the night. So the point is, see how he lets the absurdity of it. He never explains the scene beyond what's happening. And so we're left with that in that enjoyable place of really wondering how to connect the dots. And when you have the situation, when the scene is set up, so we see what's there, we aren't lost in the poem, we have a lot more latitude to just explore that universe and then not really know what to make of it, but enjoy the fact that we don't know exactly what to make of it. And I think that's the kind of thing that this poem can do. And it makes you want to read the poem again because you want to sort of re-enter that place. That you feel like there's more there, and I think there is more there, about peace, and there's the police officer and playing cops and robbers, as Hammett says. Yeah. And so I think if you go in that kind of place with this poem, it was working really well when we're on the trampoline called Premillennial. I'm not sure how many people know that reference because I was a little lost with that. Maybe a different title that leads to it a little more clearly for people who don't know, unless it's just one thing that I just never came across in a weird way, and most people know that's what it's referring to. But maybe a different title that gives us a little bit more of the sense of what it's about without that more obscure reference. But I'm jumping up and down, trying to jump for joy on this thing. And then we can hold hands, after all this stuff. The girls climb up, we hold hands with the Trampolina family. And then instead of trying to go somewhere, just let it sit. Let the bouncing get higher and higher. Or maybe even end with I'm doing my world's famous finale. I'm bouncing higher than the red oak on Linden Ave. And let it just end there. So that we want to come back and think about it and think about the way all the things connect together. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. So Jamie Thomas says, I still think, and that's what it's all about, does way more work than this current title and ties together a lot of threads. Yeah. Anyway, that's what we can say about this one. I think let the scene sort of speak for itself because it's presented so clearly. Give us a hint. I think this is too obscure a reference, but some reference to that type of thing. There's another word for that, right? Where all the Jesus takes back all the souls or whatever. Maybe a more direct reference to that would be a better title, or maybe a longer title so it leads us in that direction at least when we talk about premillennial, so we'll know a little bit more. But anyway, some better title there, and then let the scene just sit with itself. Let it play out. Let yourself jump higher and higher as a final act, and then let us wonder where you went. And I think that makes a stronger poem. Okay, let's look at the other one. I'm going to go to he sent 3. I'm going to go to the shorter of the 3 because it's past the hour. We'll do another one, though, for, again, this is Ed Jones from Pennsylvania. Preparations for the dance. If you had told me that today we would be dancing on the green over my grave, I would have applied the nose hair pickers, trimmed the cutes and nails, bathed in lavender, splashed on a brute cologne, just a hint. I would have donned my gaudiest knickers, pulled a fedora low over the shiny pate, I guess, slipped into my most floral tropical print, but put brass buckles on my shoes. I would have canceled all my morning dates, invited friends to join me graveside, come as you are, no gifts, dressed to the nines, eat and shout and dance to the blues, drink the palest ales, the finest wines, dance till we flop on June green grass like dewdrops cool, even cold to the touch. When morning comes, you'll feel the sun and slip away easy as air and pass between headstones like reveler ghosts, while I, placid as a marble stone, breathless as a lie, anticipate a summer day alone, now host only to a mass of creatures I've not called friend before, but who step lively, dressed in formal black, mandibles always ready for more, till at my final feast I get carried away. So it's interesting. This one sits with the concept and sort of does what we were saying the last poem should do. One of the things I want to point out for sure is that in this and a little bit in the other poem, but not quite so much, there's some missing punctuations. There's a lot of them here at the end of lines where there should be commas, and it's like right for here, for example, pulled a fedora low over the shiny pate. I don't know what that's supposed to be. That's another word because pate has a little weird things, right? Yeah. Is there another? So archaic, you could say pate is a person's head. He scratched his balding pate. I don't think that's what he means. I think he means pate, which has the little, the little things. So I'm not sure. Pate makes more sense. So put those, little marks in so we know. But then the real thing is that there's no comma here. Pulled a fedora low over the shiny pate, slipped into my. So I'm thinking because there's no comma, the pate itself is slipped into the most floral tropical print. It makes it really confusing and hard to read. And I tripped over a lot of lines. And add to that, too, we already mentioned the first letter being capitalized, but that gives you fewer clues when the punctuation isn't completely there for what the syntax of the sentences actually are. So put back those commas that are missing because it makes the poem really hard to read. The pate, there should be a comma, slipped into my most floral tropical print, comma, put brass buckles on my shoes. And there's other things like that throughout the poem that make it really difficult to read. Let's see. I haven't looked at the comments in a bit. So pate is head. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. So it is pate, I guess. So they're talking about head. I've never heard that word used for a head, but I guess people are. So that is head, but still, pulled a fedora low over the shiny pate, slipped into my most floral tropical print. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway. I would have canceled all my morning dates, invited friends to join me graveside. Come as you are, no gifts, dressed to the nines. Eat and shout and dance to the blues, drink the palest ales, the finest wines. Again, here's another one where we need the comma. Dance till we flop on June green grass, like dewdrops, cool. I think there needs to be a comma there, because that makes the dewdrops cooling. It becomes a verb instead of an adjective. So things like that make it tricky to read. Like dewdrops cool, even to the touch. When morning comes, you'll feel the sun slip away, easy as air, and pass between headstone like reveler ghosts, while I, placid as a marble stone, breathless lie. The breathless lie is a little bit, the inversion of that makes it hard to read, follow too. It's kind of archaic. Anticipating a summer day alone, now host only to a mass of creatures I've not called friend before. So it kind of like it's losing its energy here too. Yeah. Okay. So I'm trying to, I don't know. I mean, I like the poem. I feel like it goes on too long. Yeah, Doug Van Hooser says ants at the end. I'm trying to think of how you could just shorten this because I'm really on board. I really enjoy the poem. And then I start to sort of, like dewdrops cool, even to cold to the touch. When morning comes, you'll feel the sun and slip away easy as air and pass between headstones like reveler ghosts, while I, placid as a marble stone. I like that line a lot. Breathless lie, anticipating a summer day alone. Now host only to a mass of creatures I've not called friend before, but who step lively, dressed in formal black, mandibles always ready for more, till at my final feast I get carried away. So I like the ending, and that is the ants carrying him away. It's more, I don't know. Yeah, Laurie Flanagan says, just everyone's still talking about the pate thing. Yeah, I'm just not familiar with that word, but I have, but it's not a word you see very often. Laurie Flanagan says dome would be easier to understand than pate, and it would make a lovely sound echo with the word over. Yeah. Yeah, Holly York says I would like the poem about half as long. And that's the thing. I'm trying to figure out like what we would cut. Because there's a lot of interesting stuff. And I like where the poem goes. You know, I like the ants carrying away as the final feast. But there's something... Once it's like the... Yeah, I like the come as you are, no gifts, dress the nine, eat and shout, dance the blues, drink the palest ales, the finest wines, dance till we flop on the June grass like dewdrops, cool, even cold to the touch. I like it up to there. When morning comes, and maybe it's just the morning coming isn't as interesting. When morning comes, or maybe the description of what happens then isn't interesting. You'll feel the sun and slip away easy as air and pass between headstones like reveler ghosts. While I, placid as a marble stone, breathless lie, anticipating a summer day. Maybe, I don't know. It feels like we could, yeah. Yeah, Bryn Pope says, I think the poem could be condensed and still keep its momentum and power. And see some good lines for their poem, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, it's a matter of condensing this. Katie Scruggs Galloway says, I think the poem could start at Come As You Are, with the earlier lines following. Where's the Come As You Are? Oh, that's interesting. So starting here is a good idea. So preparations for the dance. Come as you are, no gifts, dress the nines, eat and shout and dance. And then we could pull some of this up. If you had told me that today we would be dancing on the grain over my grave, I would have applied nose hair prickers. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what, because it definitely has a sense of being too long, but what to cut and how to condense it is a little tricky. Yeah, Holly York points this out, and I thought about too, that Come As You Are is the opposite of Dress the Nines. And that's true too. And you know, it should be like or Dress the Nines. You know, Come As You Are or Dress the Nines. No gifts, eat or shout. Yeah, I guess we were all thinking that. It's this tiny point, but I was thinking that too. I think it should be or. Yeah. Well, anyway, I think this is a matter of cutting this poem down. We're past the time. I got to get going. Thanks everybody for sharing these. I think they're really good poems. We had this one. I just think finding a way to get it tighter is the key to that one. And then the other one, I think the ending just hasn't found itself. But a lot of really good stuff in both of these poems. I really enjoyed reading them both. A lot of great lines, a good sense of rhythm and energy. Same thing with the last poet we read too. So good stuff to look at today. And that's going to wrap up the critique of the week. That poet again was Ed Jones. That's going to wrap up the critique for this week. Hope everybody enjoyed it. Thanks for being here. It's always fun hanging out with you. Now, a reminder, coming up on the Rattlecast, the guest this week is going to be Julia Kolchinsky, whose new book, she was a guest talking about her book 40 Weeks a few years ago. Her new book, Parallax, is about being a mother to a neurodiverse child. And so she explores that in this book, Parallax. It's going to be really fun talking to her. She's a wonderful performer as well as a poet, so she's really great at reading. Should be a lot of entertainment in this episode, as well as serious and important topic that Julie is writing about this time. That's Rattlecast number 318. Again, the prompt was to write... Let me look up the exact details of how it was expressed. It was... because your essays should have included all the senses? How did she put it? Write an essay that includes an allusion to at least 5 senses. So an allusion to at least 5 senses. That is your assignment. And that'll, I think, thinking about the different senses will help you hit that topic in your essay from a lot of different angles. So I think that's why that's put in there, and that should be a lot of fun to do. Try your own essay. Of course, watch the Poetry Space for Jane Hirschfield describing the form in her own words. Find that on Spotify or iTunes or whatever. That's Katie's show. That should be a lot of fun. The guest, Julia Kolchinsky. That's Monday, November 10th, the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great weekend. In the meantime, we'll talk to you later. Goodbye.